Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations on comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Season 4 premiere of The Umbrella Academy. Great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, want to say I have no idea what to expect from this season. I avoided the teaser trailer except for getting a thumbnail for my watch list video, but other than that, I skimmed through the trailer without paying attention to any details, so I had no idea what to really expect from this season or where we'd start, how it all played out. I wasn't expecting the 6-year time skip, because I guess in my head I was almost treating it like how Season 3 started. Season 3 started immediately in the aftermath of Season 2, but no, they've been living in this new timeline for 6 years and kind of getting adjusted to it. Because there's certain things I wasn't thinking about in the grand scheme of things, because I thought, now that Allison would have, Claire back, I thought she'd be with not necessarily Claire's dad, but be with, I'm blanking on the character's name, but it's the dude she married in the 60s that she wanted to be with again, and I thought Victor could be with Missy again. I believe that was the character's name, I could be misremembering, but I thought that was all going to work out, but it's no, because those people, even though the timeline's been reset, the universe has been reset, and even though they're in this timeline, it's not like all of time converged in this one moment. It's all these different timelines all the timelines have slid together, but that doesn't mean anything from the past automatically comes to present day. So right, those relationships and everything were in the 60s, so it's right, of course none of them would be alive present day. So it's but at least at the end of the day, Allison has her daughter back. I think that also probably plays a role in why Vic is so alone. It kind of seems like they kind of joke at the bar yo, Vic's kind of ran through everyone through town, and Vic's no, it's not like that. But I guess Vic's trying to fill some hole in his heart, maybe. That's kind of interesting. It's what you kind of expect. The family, you find them all in their respective different situations. First and foremost, let's start off. Well, I guess let's do it in chronological order. Let's start off with Let's start off with Luther, who is. I don't know if it seems like that's Luther's main job, is being a stripper. Was it Space Boy? I felt so bad for him because it's the most awkward thing. But at least he has one fan. No one else is paying him any attention except for that one lady. Hey, you gotta put on the big time performance for her. She enjoyed it and she got her money's worth. But it's hey, at least someone's feeling you. And then we, find out, because I was wondering, what about the whole Sloane situation? So it seems like he probably never found Sloane, because she probably doesn't exist in his timeline, sadly. Despite a lot of timelines converging, because the Sparrows never existed in his timeline either, so it kind of makes sense that Ben's kind of a enigma, what's the word I'm looking for? A paradox in a lot of ways, because we still don't have the answer to the mid-season, the mid-credits or post-credit from the season 3 finale, where we saw the other Ben, so implying there's two Bens here, but 6 years and they've never come across each other, not unless he has a completely different identity. It could also just be because I don't remember the setting of that train he was on. That could be in Korea, so that might also be why it's right, you're around, you're on the other side of the world. I believe it was Korea, but maybe I'm mistaken. But either way, it's you're all the way around the other side of the world, so of course you'd never link that together despite everything. Good, so. But either way, Luther's trying to make the best of it, but it also is kind of that thing of, yeah, Luther continues to be the sad sack of the group. This family's dysfunctional and everyone's kind of sad, but Luther tends to be the saddest person. To be fair, it might be a tie between him, Diego, and Victor. Once again, everyone's unhappy in their own ways, but it's yeah, he's living at the Hargraves home for boys. It's a rundown, condemned building, and it's it was their home at one point in time, so it's sad that you couldn't find a home anywhere else. You kind of ended up going back home, even though you kind of, it also makes sense considering Luther has always been bound to home. He was always the one that stuck around when everyone else split, so it almost feels even sadder and more depressing for him, even after all of this, still having that be his home. It's kind of depressing when you actually think about it. And he's just trying to live he's trying to pretend everything's okay, but even he's just, later on they're life is working fantastic for him. He's fantastic? I wouldn't say that. It's okay. He's getting by, but yeah, so life isn't what he thought it'd be. I mean, he originally wanted to be with Allison, and then he found a new start in life with Sloane, and now that's all complete. It's like, now I've kind of walked away with nothing. So we have that. Then we had the Diego and Lila of it all, where, oh, like, kids, marriage, and, you know, it's like, it makes sense that these two would be, because Diego's the one that's always about having a mission, and Lila, you know, spent her time as an assassin, so it feels like the wild people of the team, like, who just kind of like, yeah, we're like, the more, not spontaneous isn't the word I'm looking for, but they're the more energetic, crazy life type of people in the family, and for them to kind of have the most mundane life, that he's like a kind of a he's a delivery driver, and it's just the life is just kind of kick him in the balls, and him and Lila don't seem to have a good relationship. There was even this moment he was talking to Luther about, like, right, she tried to tell me that you can't get pregnant while she's breastfeeding, and he was like, yeah, you can. I guess it also makes sense that they'd want multiple children. I wasn't actually paying attention to, like, what kids they have, because they have 3 kids, but I was about to say, like, do they have a son? Because I was like, well, what in home dude's name, like, Stanley? The kid that wasn't actually, like, the kid that Lila, didn't she, like, hire him to, like, yeah, because he was someone else's kid that she was like, oh, pretending to be her kid when it wasn't. I don't know if they were trying to fill that void to some extent, but it just, we have no idea what went down in these 6 years for him. And who knows if we'll ever, like, fully know. Like, this episode might be the only catch-up we really get to what's kind of going down for them in those 6 years. Or maybe we'll kind of get a little bit more of it over the season, but it's just like, right, the season's on the shorter side. It's only 6 episodes, sadly, so some of that's probably not going to get covered. And maybe even if it does, it gets covered in a minor scale, but we have no idea what's going on there. Lila's lying about what she's up to. She's like, oh, I'm going to book club and stuff like that. She kind of, it makes sense. Like, Diego loves the whole family angle, but he's also missing the action thrill of it all. Lila is too, but neither one of them can really admit it to each other. I guess it's like, because it'd be almost like a, I don't know, we kind of got into this family situation and we just have regrets of like, yeah, we kind of let our lives pass us by. It just feels like we're practically dead already. It feels like they're kind of at that point in their lives, because it's like, oh, where's the passion? Where's the excitement? It's kind of like, what was it, Diego's kind of like your job takes out like a lot of your soul, and then like your kids and your family sucks the last little bit of your soul away. So it's like, yeah, like I said, the mundane aspect of just living a normal life, especially when you've had powers, when you've been special for so long. It seems like Dave probably taking it, well, I'd say Ben's probably the one that's probably taking it the hardest post all of this, but we'll get to it when we get to it. And sadly, later on, Diego's under the impression Lila is having an affair, even though it was like, he didn't know it was 5 because he couldn't tell from behind. He was just like following because he's like, he knows something's up. It's like, well, you didn't get this piñata from like the west side. You went to the east side. He's like, I know, because like that piñata has a very specific style to it, and they're harder to bust open. So, which poor Luther like completely screwed up his niece's birthday, which is so sad, because it's like, oh, like, he was just so, like, about getting, like, what's inside the piñata, and the cake fell. It was a whole ordeal. It's kind of nice to know that Lila's parents are alive in this. It's like, oh, cool, so Himmler didn't murder them in this timeline and stuff. Which I love that Diego's like, oh, I'm glad they're alive, but I kind of don't like the fact that they're living with that's too much, you know? Or just, like, having to deal with them. So, you have Allison. Her career is not what she would want it to be. She's doing commercials and stuff like that. I mean, I guess it also probably, like, her powers probably did help her get her career to where it was. So now without them, it's just kind of having the typical actor struggle, because she's like, I don't want to be just a commercial actor. She's, you know, trying to do everything she can to, like, progress her career, but it's like, well, that's kind of blowing up in her face, and the whole thing has kind of complicated her relationship with Claire, because she finally has Claire back, but it's also like, well, Claire's a teenager now, and teenagers are going to be spiteful, and they're going to hate you, and they're not going to appreciate all the sacrifices. She'll never know all the sacrifices you went through to get her back and everything, you know, to live in a universe where she exists and everything. So there's that. I'm curious, is that why she didn't want to be around the family? Because she was like, yeah, they're going to hate me. And Lila was like, no, it's going to be fine. And then everyone was kind of awkward around her. It's like, I'd assume it's, well, it's not just a resetting time. It's like, yeah, you made a deal with Dad, and Dad was going to kill all of us. To be fair, you saved us, but you're also the one that pulled the trigger on resetting the universe. And it's like, well, we didn't really have time at that moment to really yell at you because we were all figuring out, oh, wait, we're in a new timeline. The universe is reset. We don't have our powers. What's changed? What's the same? So it seems like they very rarely gotten together all together in the past 6 years because, we'll get to Ben when we get to Ben. So it does seem like the person she's kind of latched onto the most is Klaus, which I find so interesting in a lot of ways. But it's like, I feel like that relationship got developed a lot more in season 2, like Allison and Klaus. But, you know, because obviously Klaus and Ben were like the pair. So for Klaus and Allison, and it's like, well, he's going through his recovery, and I guess that was Allison's way to kind of help out because Klaus kind of didn't have anywhere else, any other prospects. I mean, what does Klaus do other than just being like the very he's always been the eccentric uncle, but I mean, just eccentric sibling and stuff like that. But after everything you've been through, it's understandable why he would kind of be like crazy like he is now. He's like very germophobic and stuff like that. It's like, right, we're talking about the dude who has been surrounded by death his entire life. It's like, hey, there's the whole situation of, I'm like been with my dead brother for years, dealing with the dead in general, and having been dead myself, and the afterlife is kind of like, yeah, you want to hold on to life because it's the only life you got, kind of only universe we got to. So it's like, you want to kind of, and he's like super overprotective, not just to Claire but to himself. He just lives on edge like that. Plus he's sober too, so I'm sure that's playing a massive role in it. It feels funny that the most out of pocket of the siblings is the one that is the most like anal retentive now, and I don't know if that'd be like the right term to use in this regard, but like him being so like not himself, you know, it's kind of wild. So we have that. We have 5, who's a part of the CIA. It's like, well, I mean, it makes sense. You were literally a hitman, you know, you survived the apocalypse and then you became a time-traveling hitman. Makes sense. At first I was like, is that the actor who actually, like, did he grow a mustache? I was like, I can't tell if that's actually a fake mustache or a real. It's a fake mustache. He's like, but it is made from horsehair, so it's really good quality. So I was like, oh, that was like, I was wondering if the actor actually, I didn't know if like Aiden actually grew a mustache for that moment. I was like, that's fascinating. He's looking into this timekeeper's business, which seems to be kind of a cult that recognizes, for whatever reason, they're the only people in existence. Well, not just them. There's multiple chapters around the world apparently who recognize that time, like, is different. Like that, that it's like, oh, because that dude at the meeting was like, oh yeah, Reginald Hargreaves is an alien, and it's like, okay. So, and everyone didn't think he was crazy. So, and even I thought was interesting, 5 was able to tell his true history. He was like, yeah, I'm actually 63. I was from the future, an apocalyptic future. And yada, 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 telling his actual story, which I was, oh, interesting. I mean, he knows there's more there, but his boss is kind of like, yeah, you got other cases to work on. And he said this line which I thought was fascinating. He was like, oh yeah, you could be the head of this whole thing, which 5 kind of had a certain look on his face. It's like, well, to be fair, he was the head of a time organization. I mean, unbeknownst to him, he was the head of a time organization, but still, it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of funny how life works like that. Like, here you are going to be at the top of another agency if you play your cards right, type of thing. Then we had Ben, who's apparently been in jail for the past 4 years for crypto exchange and stuff like that. It's like, I didn't really do too much. I'm like, basically kind of compare. He's like, I'm kind of like the next Elon, and it's like, I'm kind of the out of the box type of person like Elon, and it's like, yeah, you did kind of rob like 100,000 family or people, so kind of has no remorse. But it's like, well, he was already this version of Ben was already a dick, so he's continued to be a dick in this new universe and timeline. And then we have Victor, who is in Canada, which Elliot's from Canada. Isn't like where they're actually at? Because wasn't he in Nova Scotia? Isn't that actually where Elliot's from? I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wondered if that was supposed to be like a wink and nod to actually that, because I was like, yeah, Elliot's actually from Nova Scotia, right? I feel like I remember that from an interview years and years ago. From like over a decade ago. Either way, So other than finding out, keeping up with the Hargreaves, finding out what they've been up to, Elliot got kidnapped by David Cross. I was looking, I was like, is that David Cross? It sure as hell is. I was like, interesting. I was like, well, you probably could have found a better way, which I'm sure, like, that's also going to make Victor feel a certain way, because it's like, Jesus, like, can I not just, like, be in the crosshairs of somebody being taken by, like, or manipulated or controlled or kidnapped by, like, somebody or some sociopath? It's like, Victor's always kind of had, sadly, the, like, worst luck with that type of situation. And this all coincides with the Keepers, which were turns out the leaders of them is Gene and Gene, which I was like, oh crap, it's Nick Offerman. But then I was looking, I was like, is that Megan Mullally? And it's like, yeah, it is. I was like, oh, that's super cute. You get to be like this cute couple on screen together. It's like, I'm so curious how often they get to act together. I'm curious off the top of my head. I'm sure she had to have popped up in Parks and Rec at some point in time. I've never watched Parks and Rec. I've seen bits and pieces, but I'm like, she had to have popped in at some point in time. But either way, I was like, oh, that's cute. And they, very stone cold killers. The fact is that they killed that guy they bought that, like, movie tapes of, because one was like, oh, this is this person, but, like, in another reality it was Allison. So it's them. They've been gathering proof that there are multiple timelines collapsed into this one. I'd assume it's more than two. Maybe it's not, but I'd assume it's more than two. I wonder if it would kind of be like, would it be kind of like three representing the three previous timelines of, well, obviously we know it's not the case of three, because we know the Sparrows timeline doesn't exist. Because the Sparrows don't exist. So it's probably more like a combination of season 1's timeline, which was kind of the original timeline, and season 2's timeline of probably kind of like all... Well, no, because it's like, well, that was all in the past and stuff like that, but they did make changes, so... Yeah, I don't even love the copyrighted term, the umbrella effect, because there have been artifacts they found of, merchandise of the Umbrella Academy, and then we also have, like, Reginald and their dad and his wife. And I think it's interesting that when Victor was about to get kidnapped by David Cross's character, the first thing out of Victor's mouth was like, if my dad wants to say something to me, he can say it to me himself. And it's like, the fact is that was what Victor immediately thought. I thought was so interesting, because I'm like, have you been in contact with your dad in these 6 years where the others haven't? I mean, it seems like they've all just kind of kept to themselves. Like, they know who their dad is, but it's like, we're just going to live our lives not giving a shit. It's like, he's doing his thing, we're doing ours. We don't have power, so why even bother trying? So I find that fascinating. But also, I guess Victor's like, yeah, Dad's such an asshole that this feels like right up his alley to do this. So maybe that's also why Victor said that. But I just think that's interesting. But either way, Luther got left the ransom note for... Well, it's not really a ransom note, but just a kidnapping note about Victor. They go and rescue Victor, and it kind of seemed like such a nonchalant thing, because he's an amateur, and he just wanted to get them together. Turns out, like, his daughter is connected to the Keepers and this whole organization, which Five, understandably why Lila's not saying anything, but Five is, well, it's a CIA investigation. His family doesn't have powers. He is kind of, an agent, government agent, so it's like he can, do something about it, but I guess he doesn't want to drag his family into it, especially because of what him and Lila discovered, because they're like, because their perspective is, or at least Five's theory is, if all this stuff is collapsing into this particular timeline, then maybe what their father was doing didn't stick, and now it's all kind of unraveling again. And it's like, well, the last thing we want to do is panic our siblings, considering everything they went through to get here, what Allison went through to get here, plus the lives they're leading are okay at best, so that's why he's not saying anything about the Keepers and stuff like that, even though him and Lila were just at a meeting. Because they're talking about the cleanse, which is supposed to... He's like, oh, they say, like, it's supposed... Some people consider it the end, but the genes look at it as more like a reset of time being on the correct timeline it was supposed to be. It's like, well, the correct timeline supposedly was supposed to be the apocalypse, is where that's supposed to be. So it's like... Is that the better alternative? I mean, it's like, well, changing all that eventually led to not just Earth ending, the entire universe ending. So it's kind of like maybe that's a. We'll see where things kind of go on that front. But we also found like amongst David Cross's character's like daughter, her name is Jennifer. Amongst her stuff was some marigold. So for her to have access to that, and must mean there's some correlation or connection to their father. Maybe he's the reason why she's going missing. Because he also showed them a newspaper article that showed like, oh, the Umbrella Academy saved the Eiffel Tower, and it's like, and if you look at the picture, it's like, yeah, that's what they looked like in season 2, which I think is very telling. Like they specifically chose that picture. So like, wait, how did, like, for one, we never did that in the original timeline. We never would have had an opportunity to do that post season 2. So what the fuck is this picture? And it's like, well. So I guess that's like another timeline that's bleeding over into this one. Like maybe things played differently in season 2. Like when they came back to their timeline, like back to present day, maybe it's kind of implying like that's from a universe where things played differently. And they didn't end up in an alternate timeline with the Sparrows. They ended up in the original timeline or some close version of the original timeline. Maybe. Once again, why is all this, like, is it just all the timelines are collapsed because it's too much for one universe to handle all these multiple timelines? Is it like corroding it and collapsing it? Is that why all this stuff is here? It's kind of like paradoxes are popping up all over the place, and that's going to be this timeline or universe's undoing. So many questions. It's only the first episode, so little answers at this point in time. But like, once again, why is it that Jean and Jean know? Once again, it's a time travel thing of like your brain compensating for the multiple timelines. Like why it's more apparent to some people than it is others. Like why is Jean and Jean special? But like there's other people that are just seem regular people too. So maybe there's more to that. But either way, there's a conversation of, does anyone want their powers back? And there's a little Klaus. It's understandable why he doesn't want his powers back. He's like, I'm finally sober. I'm not great, but I'm in it. I'm managing, you know. But everyone, Victor, understandably, is like, Victor's always had like, upon finding out about their powers, it's like that's always kind of been his undoing. So it's understandable why Victor wouldn't want his powers back. But everyone else, you can tell, kind of wants them. I mean, it's kind of like, does Five need his powers back to kind of fuck up some time stuff again? It's like, yeah, sure, teleporting, but also, like, you could fuck around and time travel again. So it's like, we really need you having that. Diego's complaining about the guy working the grill, like his spatula movements and stuff like that. I was like, how the angles are horrible and stuff like that. I think Lilo probably misses her powers. Diego probably does too. Luther as well. It's like, well, you get back your powers, you won't have to have the gorilla body situation. So I was kind of thinking like, oh, would he have to go through them? And I'm like, all right, your body got damaged and your dad saved your life by putting you on a gorilla body. I was like, I forgot that wasn't it's been a while, so I'd actually forgotten. It's like, right, that wasn't an original byproduct of your body. No, it was like, well, no, what you put on a gorilla body? No, your dad like experimented on your own body and it ended up giving you the gorilla body. It wasn't a byproduct of your original powers. Either way, Ben's the only one who outwardly is like, yo, I want my powers back. So when he kind of was like, oh, let's do a toast, I was like, did he dose everybody? But it's like, no. I mean, it makes, like, you part of you would be like, well, let Ben have his powers back since he wants them back and just no one else gets it. But it's like, no, we have to make a decision as a family. It doesn't have to be a unilateral decision as long as it's a majority rules thing. But it's like, no one wants to be the ones to admit, like, they kind of want their powers back because their lives have kind of been, from their perspectives, a little shitty. It hadn't been the greatest, you know, so. But Ben took the marigold. I'm curious, it'd be very poetic if they kind of pulled a Misfits here. Yes, with Robert, that's why I said that'd be interesting. If you don't want to talk about spoilers for Misfits, season 2, all the main protagonists lost their powers, and in season 3, everyone got new abilities. because they couldn't get their original abilities back, so everyone ended up with like different abilities. So I'm curious if that, I'm sure everyone's probably going to get their OG powers back, but I think it'd be interesting if like the siblings all switched powers, if that ended up being kind of what that happened. I mean, it'd be interesting for Lila's case, considering like what her powers like was absorbing and like copying everyone else's powers. So it almost feels poetic if that ended up going to like Diego, but also if it feels befitting if it ended up in Victor's hand. Like I said, if that ends up being the case, the story they tell, I don't know if that's where it's going to go. It's probably going to be like everyone gets their original abilities, but just because of the Misfits connection, I think it'd be interesting if they kind of did a scrambling amongst the powers, or maybe just gave them new powers in general. But I feel like shorter season, it probably be, if you're not going to give them original abilities, it has to be a swap between all of their abilities. But we'll see where all of this ultimately ends up taking us. Like I said, I'm excited to see how this all plays out, and I have no idea what to expect and how this is all going to play out, where this is all going to go, how this is all going to unravel, what role their father and his wife are going to play in all of this. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.